The warning no one believed. The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and floating platforms. Representatives from 78 different civilizations gathered in the Grand Chamber, their forms as diverse as the stars themselves. Some breathed methane, others existed as pure energy contained in specialized fields. The chamber accommodated them all, a testament to 10,000 years of galactic cooperation and peace. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the center of the hall, dwarfed by the massive architecture and the beings surrounding her. She was human, and that meant she was small. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 80 years ago, after finally developing faster-than-light travel. In galactic terms, humans were infants. In practical terms, they were barely noticed. Sarah carried a data crystal in her hand. It contained information that could save thousands of lives, if only someone would listen. She had requested this emergency session 3 weeks ago. The assembly had granted it, but she could see the dismissive expressions on the faces capable of showing expression. The others radiated boredom through their translator fields. The assembly chancellor, a being named Vorith from the Kelthian Empire, floated on his platform high above the floor. His species resembled crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light. He had governed the assembly for 200 years, and his patience for humanity's concerns was wearing thin. Ambassador Chin, Vorith's voice resonated through every translator in the hall. You have called this session to discuss a restricted zone around your home system. Please state your case quickly. We have important matters to address today. Sarah felt the weight of 78 civilizations watching her with indifference. She activated the data crystal, and a holographic projection appeared above her head. It showed Earth's solar system surrounded by a spherical boundary marked in red. Honored representatives, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Earth has established a defensive perimeter around our home system. This perimeter extends 20 light-years in all directions from our sun. We are formally requesting that all military vessels avoid entering this zone. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Several representatives made sounds that translators interpreted as laughter. Sarah pressed on. This is not a political statement or a territorial claim. This is a safety warning. The perimeter contains automated defensive systems that cannot distinguish between hostile and friendly military vessels. These systems will activate automatically if military ships enter the zone. We cannot deactivate them remotely. This was done by design. A representative from the Zinther Collective, a massive being with 6 arms and bioluminescent skin, spoke up. His name was Commander Rolf, and he commanded the largest fleet in the Eastern Spiral Arm. Ambassador Chen, Rolf said, his tone patronizing. The Zinther military has protected this galaxy for 5,000 years. Our shields can withstand direct hits from stellar flares. Our weapons can crack planets. What possible defensive system could threaten us? Sarah had expected this question. She had prepared for it, dreaded it, and knew her answer would not be believed. Our defensive grid uses gravitational manipulation technology. Each platform can generate localized gravitational anomalies strong enough to... Gravitational manipulation? Vorith interrupted. Ambassador, your species barely understands quantum physics. The technology you describe is theoretical even for the most advanced civilizations here. Are you seriously claiming that humans, who only achieved spaceflight 2 centuries ago, have mastered gravity itself? We did not master it, Sarah said quietly. We learned to use it at great cost. And yes, we understand that it seems impossible. That is precisely why I am standing here begging you to take this warning seriously. Another representative stood. This was Telmara from the Scientific Consortium of Vel. Her species valued knowledge above all else, and she looked genuinely curious rather than dismissive. Ambassador Chin, if what you claim is true, could you explain how your species developed this technology? The energy requirements alone should be beyond your civilization's capacity. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the part she had hoped to avoid, but honesty was her only weapon here. 300 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself in a series of wars over resources and territory. We call it the collapse. 4 billion people died. Our planet was devastated. In desperation, our scientists developed prototype gravitational devices to access new energy sources. The first tests failed catastrophically. The second test destroyed an entire research station and everyone on it. The third test worked, but we learned that the technology was too dangerous to use for anything except defense. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Sarah continued. We built the defensive grid specifically to protect Earth. Each platform is anchored to an asteroid and cannot be moved. Each one operates independently, so there is no central system to hack or disable. They activate automatically when they detect military-grade vessels within the perimeter. The response is instantaneous and irreversible. We built them this way because we do not trust ourselves with weapons that can be easily used for aggression. Commander Rolfe laughed, a booming sound that echoed through the chamber. You built weapons you cannot control. This is the height of foolishness. What happens when you need to deactivate them in an emergency? Then we cannot, Sarah said. And that is intentional. Only 5 people on Earth have authorization codes to shut down the grid, and all 5 must agree. Even then, it takes 72 hours to safely deactivate the system. We designed it this way to prevent misuse. Voritha's crystalline form pulsed with what translators interpreted as frustration. Ambassador Chin, the Assembly cannot allow individual systems to declare restricted zones without proof of legitimate need. Your claims are extraordinary and unsupported. We must verify that this perimeter is not hiding military buildup or aggressive intentions. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had known this might happen, but hearing it made it real. Chancellor Vorith, I am formally advising against any verification attempts. If you send military vessels into the perimeter, the defensive grid will activate. People will die. This is not a negotiation tactic. This is not a bluff. This is a desperate warning from a species that has already paid a terrible price for playing with forces we barely understand. Commander Rolfe stepped forward, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically. The Assembly will not be intimidated by a species that learned to build starships less than a century ago. I will personally lead a verification fleet to your perimeter. Your automated systems will detect our overwhelming superiority and you will shut them down. Then we can discuss Earth's place in the galactic order. Sarah looked around the chamber. She saw agreement on most faces and in most translator readouts. Only a handful of representatives looked uncertain. She had failed. Despite her warnings, despite her explanations, despite her honest plea, they would not listen. Chancellor Vorith, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. How many ships will be in this verification fleet? Vorith consulted his data display. Commander Rolfe will lead 60 ships. Each vessel carries approximately 1,500 crew members. They will approach your perimeter, demonstrate the Assembly's authority, and you will deactivate your systems. This is not negotiable. Sarah did the math quickly. 90,000 people. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked directly at Vorith. Chancellor, I want to remember this number. 90,000 people. When they die, I want every representative in this chamber to remember that we warned you. We explained the danger. We begged you not to send them. What happens next is not our choice. It is yours. She bowed formally, as was customary when leaving the assembly floor, then turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Rolfe laughing again, saying something about primitive species and empty threats. Other representatives joined in the laughter. Sarah kept walking. She reached the corridor outside the chamber and stopped, leaning against the wall. Her hands were shaking. She pulled out her communication device and sent an encrypted message to Earth, to the Defense Monitoring Command, to Director James Mitchell, who oversaw the perimeter systems. The message was brief: they are coming. Verification fleet of 60 ships. 90,000 crew members. ETA 72 hours. Begin continuous monitoring and prepare to document everything. The galaxy needs to see what happens when warnings are ignored. She waited for the reply. It came within seconds. Understood. All monitoring stations are now active. God help us all. Sarah slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. 72 hours. In 72 hours, 90,000 people would die because their leaders refused to believe that humanity could be dangerous. They saw humans as primitive newcomers, too young and too simple to pose any real threat. They would learn otherwise, but the lesson would cost lives that should not be lost. She thought about her own family back on Earth. Her daughter was studying gravitational physics at the Mars Institute. Her son worked on one of the defensive platforms, maintaining the systems that would soon activate. He had chosen that assignment specifically because he believed in protecting Earth. He had told her once that humanity's greatest weakness was trusting others to respect their boundaries. The defensive grid existed because history had taught humanity a hard lesson. When you cannot enforce your boundaries, others will violate them. Sarah pulled herself to her feet. She had 72 hours to try one more time. She would go to Commander Rolfe directly. She would show him Earth's historical records, the data from the collapse, the mathematical models of what the defensive grid could do. Maybe, just maybe, if she could make him understand on a personal level, she could prevent this tragedy. But deep down she knew the truth. Commander Rolfe had 5,000 years of military tradition behind him. He commanded fleets that had never lost a battle. He served an assembly that had maintained peace through strength for 10 millennia. Why would he listen to a human who represented a species that still fought wars among themselves just 3 centuries ago? Sarah made her way through the corridors of the assembly complex toward the Zinther diplomatic quarters. She would try anyway. Even if the chance was 1 in 1,090,000 lives were worth that attempt. Commander Rolth received her in his strategy room, surrounded by holographic displays of his fleet formations and tactical data. He looked surprised to see her but gestured for her to enter. Ambassador Chen, Rolth said. I did not expect a personal visit. Have you come to deactivate your defensive systems? Sarah shook her head. I have come to show you exactly what will happen if your fleet enters the perimeter. Please just give me 10 minutes of your time. Look at the data. Look at our history. Understand what you are walking into. Rolth considered this, then nodded. 10 minutes. But I warn you, Ambassador, nothing you show me will change the Assembly's decision. Sarah activated her portable holographic projector. Images filled the room, showing Earth during the collapse, cities burning, oceans poisoned, billions dying. Then she showed the early gravitational experiments, the failures, the catastrophic accidents, the slow, painful progress toward understanding. Finally, she showed the mathematical models of the defensive grid, the calculations that proved its capabilities. Rolth studied the data carefully. When she finished, he looked at her with something that might have been respect. Your species has suffered greatly. I can see that. But Ambassador, suffering does not equal technological superiority. These models assume capabilities that should be impossible for your level of development. I believe you have convinced yourselves that your defenses work, but reality will prove otherwise. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away. Commander, I am begging you. Please delay the fleet. Give us time to arrange a demonstration with unmanned probes. Let us prove that the system works without risking lives. Rolth shook his head. The fleet departs in 60 hours. We will approach your perimeter, your systems will detect our power, and you will shut them down. This is how it must be, Ambassador. The Assembly cannot allow individual systems to dictate terms to the galactic community. Sarah stood and bowed formally. Then may your gods have mercy on your souls, Commander. Because our defensive grid will not. She left the strategy room and returned to Earth's embassy. She had one final task. She sat down and began writing 90,000 names. She did not know them yet, but she would learn them. Every single person who would die because the galaxy refused to listen to a warning. 60 hours later, Commander Rolth's verification fleet assembled at the rally point near the edge of Assembly space. 60 warships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, each one carrying 1,500 souls who believed in the Assembly's invincibility. The fleet began its journey toward Earth's perimeter. They traveled in perfect formation, their shields at maximum, their sensors scanning for any sign of the mysterious defensive grid that humans claim to possess. Sarah watched from Earth's Defense Monitoring Command Center. Around her, dozens of technicians monitored the defensive platforms. Director Mitchell stood beside her, his face grim. The fleet will reach the perimeter boundary in 15 minutes, Mitchell said quietly. Sarah nodded. She had done everything possible. Now all she could do was witness the consequence of being right when everyone else insisted she was wrong. On the main display she could see Commander Rolth's face. He was broadcasting on an open channel, probably expecting humans to be watching. Earth Defense Command, Rolth's voice boomed. This is Commander Rolth of the Assembly Verification Fleet. We are approaching your claimed perimeter. Deactivate your defensive systems immediately. This is your final warning. Sarah took the microphone. Commander Rolth, this is Ambassador Sarah Chen. You are 12 minutes from the perimeter boundary. I am begging you one final time. Stop your approach. Turn your fleet around. We will arrange a proper demonstration. Please do not sacrifice 90,000 lives to prove a point. Rolth's expression hardened. Ambassador, we are proceeding. If your systems activate, we will destroy them and then the Assembly will decide Earth's future. Sarah set down the microphone. There was nothing more to say. She watched the countdown timer on the main display. 10 minutes. 5 minutes. 1 minute. The fleet crossed the perimeter boundary. For exactly 4 seconds nothing happened. Sarah could see relief beginning to form on Rolth's face. He had been right. The human defensive systems were a bluff, or they did not work, or they... Then every alarm in the Defense Monitoring Command Center began screaming simultaneously. On the tactical display, 90,000 red warning indicators appeared, surrounding each of the 60 ships in Rolth's fleet. Sarah watched as the gravitational anomalies formed, watched as space itself bent and twisted around the assembly vessels. The last transmission from Commander Raltha's flagship lasted less than 2 seconds. His face appeared on screen, confusion transforming into horror, his mouth opening to say something that would never be finished. Then 60 ships, carrying 90,000 crew members, simply ceased to exist. They did not explode. They did not burn. They collapsed inward upon themselves, compressed by gravitational forces beyond imagining, crushed down to points smaller than atoms, gone in the space of a single heartbeat. When it was over, space looked exactly as it had before. Empty, peaceful, silent. Except now, 90,000 people were dead and the galaxy would never be the same. Retry BB. The aftermath and new reality. The silence in the Galactic Assembly Hall was absolute. Every representative, regardless of their species or method of communication, sat frozen in stunned horror. The main display screens showed the telemetry data from the verification fleet's final moments. 60 ships had simply vanished from existence. 90,000 life signs had disappeared simultaneously from every monitoring system in the galaxy. Chancellor Voritha's crystalline form had stopped pulsing entirely, something observers had never seen before. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried none of its usual authority. What happened? What weapon was that? Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the same spot where she had delivered her warning 72 hours earlier. She had not left Earth's embassy since the fleet departed, but she had been summoned back to the assembly the moment the ships disappeared. Now she stood before them again, and this time every eye was fixed on her with fear rather than dismissal. "That was exactly what I warned you about," Sarah said quietly. The Terran defensive grid responded to military vessels entering the protected perimeter. It generated localized gravitational singularities around each ship. The process takes 4 seconds from detection to completion. There is no defense against it because shields and armor are meaningless against gravity itself. A representative from the philosophical circle, a being of pure thought energy named Essence, spoke through its translator field. "How many of these gravitational weapons does Earth possess?" "They are not weapons in the traditional sense," Sarah explained. "They are defensive platforms. We have 318,000 of them positioned throughout the perimeter. Each platform can generate up to 6 simultaneous singularities. They operate independently and automatically. As I told you before, we cannot deactivate them remotely." Commander Raltha's second officer, a Zinther named Kelthus, rose from his seat. His 6 arms trembled with rage and grief. "You murdered them. You murdered 90,000 people without giving them a chance to retreat or surrender." Sarah felt anger flash through her own grief and guilt. "I warned you. I stood in this chamber and explained exactly what would happen. I begged Chancellor Vorith not to send the fleet. I went to Commander Ralth personally and showed him the data. I gave you every opportunity to avoid this tragedy. You chose not to listen." Telmara from the scientific consortium stood, her expression troubled. "Ambassador Chen, I must ask, how did humanity develop this technology? The energy requirements are beyond anything we thought possible. The precision needed to generate controlled singularities should be centuries beyond your civilization's capabilities." Sarah activated her data crystal again. This time, the holographic projection showed Earth's history, but in far more detail than she had shared before. 300 years ago, humanity stood on the edge of extinction. We call it the collapse, but that term does not capture the horror of what we did to ourselves. 4 billion people died in resource wars that lasted 60 years. We poisoned our oceans, burned our forests, and turned vast regions of our planet into radioactive wastelands. We used nuclear weapons, biological plagues, and chemical agents on each other. We proved that humans with easy access to destructive weapons will use them, even against their own species. The images showed cities in ruins, children dying from radiation sickness, oceans turned black with pollution. Several representatives looked away. Others leaned forward, transfixed by the nightmare of humanity's past. When the wars finally ended, Sarah continued, only 1 billion humans remained alive. Our planet was dying. We had perhaps 50 years before Earth became completely uninhabitable. In desperation, our scientists began researching alternative energy sources. They theorized that gravitational manipulation could provide unlimited clean energy. The first experiments failed. The second experiments killed 12,000 researchers when an uncontrolled singularity formed at the Tokyo Research Institute. The third experiments worked, but we learned that gravitational technology was too dangerous for casual use. A new image appeared, showing massive construction projects in space. We spent the next 100 years stabilizing our planet and moving most of our industrial base off-world. We learned to use gravitational technology carefully, with multiple safeguards and limitations. When we finally achieved faster-than-light travel and discovered we were not alone in the universe, we faced a terrible decision. We knew that other species would be more powerful than us. We knew we would be vulnerable. So we asked ourselves a question that has haunted humanity since the collapse. How do we protect ourselves without becoming the monsters we once were? The hologram changed to show the construction of the defensive grid. The answer was the Terran defensive grid. We designed it with specific limitations. The platforms cannot be moved because they are anchored to asteroids weighing millions of tons. They cannot target anything outside the perimeter because their range is artificially limited. They cannot be controlled remotely because they have no communication systems except for receiving authorization codes from Earth. They activate automatically because we do not trust ourselves to make life and death decisions in the heat of battle. We built them this way specifically to ensure they could never be used as weapons of aggression. Chancellor Voritha's form began pulsing again, slowly, as if he was struggling to process this information. You built defenses that even you cannot fully control. That is insane. Sarah looked directly at him. No, Chancellor. That is wisdom purchased with 4 billion lives. We built defenses we cannot easily use because we know what humans do when we have power without restraint. We nearly destroyed ourselves. We will never allow that to happen again, which means we will never allow anyone else to destroy us either. Kelthus spoke again, his voice breaking. My brother was on Commander Raltha's flagship. He had 3 children. He was going to retire next year. You took him from his family because you were too arrogant to deactivate your systems. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face now. She made no effort to hide them. I am sorry for your brother's death. I am sorry for all 90,000 deaths. I am sorry that your leaders sent them to die because they could not believe that humans might be telling the truth. But I will not apologize for defending Earth. Your brother died because the Assembly chose pride over caution. That responsibility lies with every representative who voted to send that fleet, not with the humans who warned you repeatedly what would happen. The chamber erupted in voices. Some representatives demanded sanctions against Earth. Others called for immediate military action. Still others argued that humanity had acted within their rights to defend their home system. The chaos continued until Voritha's voice cut through it all like a blade. Silence. The chamber fell quiet immediately. Vorith floated down from his elevated platform until he was level with Sarah. His crystalline form pulsed with colors that translators struggled to interpret. Ambassador Chin, the Assembly must understand the full capabilities of your defensive grid. Can it be penetrated? Can it be overwhelmed? What would happen if the Assembly sent 1,000 ships instead of 60? Sarah had prepared for this question as well. Each platform can generate 6 singularities simultaneously. With 318,000 platforms, the grid can engage approximately 1.9 million targets at the same time. The response time is 4 seconds regardless of how many ships enter the perimeter. Unless you plan to send 2 million vessels simultaneously, the result would be the same as what happened to Commander Raltha's fleet. The number landed on the Assembly like a physical weight. 2 million ships represented more than the total military capacity of all member civilizations combined. Telmara spoke carefully. Could you build more of these platforms? Could you extend your perimeter? Could you use this technology offensively? Yes to all 3 questions, Sarah admitted. We could build more platforms. We could expand the perimeter. We could theoretically develop mobile versions for offensive use. But we have chosen not to do any of those things. The Terran defensive grid exists solely to protect Earth. It has never fired on a non-military vessel. It has never targeted anything outside the perimeter. It activated exactly once, because 60 military ships ignored our warnings and entered protected space. She paused, then continued with emphasis. But I want to be absolutely clear about something. If the Assembly attempts to force us to dismantle the grid, we will refuse. If you attempt to blockade Earth or impose sanctions, we will maintain the grid. If you send another fleet, the grid will activate again. We did not build these defenses to negotiate them away. We built them because humanity learned the hardest possible lesson about what happens to species who cannot protect themselves. A smaller representative stood. This was Ambassador Prell from the Unified Colonies, a peaceful federation of mining worlds. Ambassador Chin, many of us understand your position. My own species was nearly exterminated by raiders before we joined the Assembly. We understand the need for defense. But surely you must see that possessing such overwhelming defensive capability makes Earth a threat to galactic stability. What assurance can you give us that humanity will not use this technology aggressively? Sarah took a deep breath. I can give you the same assurance that every other species in this chamber gives. We say we will not use our most powerful weapons except in self-defense. The difference is that we actually designed our weapons to make that promise enforceable. Our defensive platforms cannot be used offensively. They physically cannot target anything outside the perimeter. We limited ourselves deliberately because we do not trust ourselves with easy violence. She looked around the chamber. Every species here possesses weapons that could destroy planets, exterminate populations, or render entire systems uninhabitable. The Zinther have antimatter weapons. The Kelthian Empire has stellar fusion bombs. The Scientific Consortium has nanotech plagues. You all possess the capability for incredible destruction, and you all promise not to use those weapons except when necessary. You expect the galaxy to trust those promises. We ask for the same trust, with the added assurance that our most powerful defensive systems literally cannot be used for aggression. Vorith pulsed with thoughtful colors. The ambassador makes a valid point. However, 90,000 beings are dead. There must be consequences. There must be acknowledgement of responsibility. Sarah nodded slowly. Earth accepts responsibility for the deaths of Commander Raltha's fleet. We warned you, we begged you, but ultimately our defensive grid killed those people. We will provide whatever support we can to the families of the deceased. We will cooperate with any investigation into the incident. We will share the technical specifications of the defensive grid so that everyone understands what happened and why. The only thing we will not do is dismantle the grid or reduce Earth's ability to defend itself. Kelthus spoke again, quieter now. What about the bodies? Can anything be retrieved? Can we give our dead proper burial rites? Sarah's voice broke slightly as she answered. I'm sorry. When matter is compressed by gravitational forces of that magnitude, nothing remains. The ships, the crews, everything was reduced to subatomic particles that dispersed as radiation. There is nothing to retrieve. The only thing that remains is the gravitational echo, and even that will fade within days. Kelthus sat down heavily. Around the chamber, representatives absorbed this information. Their loved ones had not just died. They had been erased from existence so completely that nothing remained to mourn over. Director James Mitchell appeared on Sarah's communication device. She activated the public display so everyone could see him. Ambassador Chin, this is Director Mitchell from Earth's Defense Monitoring Command. I am transmitting complete telemetry data from the incident. Every sensor reading, every timing sequence, every calculation the defensive grid made. We want full transparency. We want everyone to understand exactly what happened. The data appeared on screens throughout the chamber. Scientists and military analysts began studying it immediately. What they saw confirmed everything Sarah had said. The defensive grid had operated exactly as designed. It had detected military vessels within the perimeter. It had calculated optimal singularity placements. It had activated within 4 seconds. The ships had been destroyed instantaneously. There had been no malfunction, no error, no deviation from specified parameters. Telmara studied the data for several minutes, then looked up with an expression of reluctant admiration. The precision is extraordinary. Each singularity was placed at the exact gravitational center of its target ship. The timing was synchronized across all 60 vessels to within microseconds. The energy management required to generate that many singularities simultaneously should have been impossible, yet the readings show it happened. This is technology we do not understand, operating at a level we cannot match. Chancellor Vorith pulsed with resignation. The Assembly must decide how to proceed. We cannot allow this incident to destabilize the galactic community, but we also cannot ignore that Earth has demonstrated capabilities far beyond what we believed possible. I'm calling for a recess. We will reconvene in one standard day to discuss Earth's status and the recognition of the Terran defensive perimeter. Sarah bowed formally. Thank you, Chancellor. Earth will cooperate fully with whatever the Assembly decides, as long as our right to self-defense is respected. The Assembly session ended. Representatives filed out slowly, many of them in shock, others deep in conversation about what they had witnessed. Sarah stood alone in the center of the Great Hall until everyone had left. Director Mitchell's face appeared on her personal device. You did everything you could, Sarah. This was not your fault. Sarah shook her head. I know that intellectually, Director. But 90,000 people are dead. I watched them die. I watched it happen in real time, knowing I could have prevented it if only someone had listened. How do I live with that? Mitchell was silent for a moment. You live with it by making sure their deaths meant something. By making sure the galaxy learns from this tragedy. By building a future where warnings are taken seriously. Sarah nodded slowly. She had hours of work ahead. She needed to compile the list of names, all 90,000 victims. She needed to coordinate with the families. She needed to prepare for the assembly's decision. But first she needed to do something else. She sent a message to every major news network in the galaxy, requesting time to make a public statement. Within an hour, billions of beings across thousands of worlds would be watching. Sarah stood before the cameras and spoke from her heart. My name is Ambassador Sarah Chin of Earth. One standard day ago, 90,000 beings died at the boundary of the Terran defensive perimeter. They died because their leaders did not believe humanity's warnings. They died because the Galactic Assembly could not accept that a young species might possess technology they did not understand. They died because pride and assumption overruled caution and reason. She paused, gathering her strength. Earth accepts responsibility for these deaths. Our defensive grid killed those people. We could have designed it differently. We could have built in warning shots or disabled systems. But we chose absolute certainty instead because humanity learned 300 years ago that half measures in defense lead to extinction. We nearly destroyed ourselves and we built the defensive grid to ensure no one could ever destroy us. The cameras captured every emotion on her face. To the families of those who died, I offer my deepest sorrow. Your loved ones were not enemies. They were not villains. They were people doing their duty as they understood it. They deserved better than the death they received. We will honor their memory. We will learn from this tragedy. And we will work to ensure it never happens again. She looked directly into the camera. To the Galactic Assembly and all civilizations watching, Earth makes this promise. We will defend ourselves with absolute certainty, but we will never use our defensive technology for aggression. We will respect all peaceful vessels. We will maintain open trade and diplomatic relations with any civilization that approaches us properly. But we will not compromise on our security. We will not dismantle our defenses. We will not apologize for surviving. Sarah ended the transmission. Within hours, her words had been broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Some praised her honesty. Others condemned her defiance. But everyone understood the message. Humanity would not be intimidated and humanity's warnings should be taken seriously. The next day the Galactic Assembly reconvened. Chancellor Vorath announced their decision. The Assembly formally recognizes the Terran defensive perimeter as legitimate sovereign space. All member civilizations are directed to respect this boundary. Military vessels must request authorization before entering the perimeter. Earth is granted a permanent seat on the Assembly Council in recognition of their advanced defensive capabilities. The deaths of 90,000 beings will be remembered as a tragic lesson in the importance of respecting warnings and understanding limitations. Sarah bowed in acceptance. Earth had achieved what it needed: recognition, respect, and the right to defend itself without interference. 6 months passed. The galaxy slowly adjusted to the new reality. Earth received thousands of requests for peaceful entry to their system. Every request was granted. Trade flourished. Scientific exchanges began. Cultural missions visited Earth to understand the species that had humbled the Assembly. A permanent memorial was constructed at Assembly headquarters. It contained 90,000 names, one for each person who died. The inscription was written in every major galactic language, including Earth's common tongue. They were warned. They did not listen. May we learn from their sacrifice that caution is not cowardice, that respecting boundaries preserves life, and that pride is the most dangerous weapon any civilization possesses. Ambassador Sarah Chin stood before the memorial during its dedication ceremony. Representatives from every civilization attended. Kelthus stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as he found his brother's name on the wall. He was a good man, Kelthus said quietly. He deserved better than this. Sarah nodded. They all did. And the best way we can honor them is by ensuring their deaths taught us what living could not. Kelthus looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. I hated you for months, Ambassador. I wanted Earth destroyed for what you did to my brother. But I have come to understand something. You tried to save him. You warned us. We chose not to listen. My brother died because of our arrogance, not your defenses. Sarah felt tears on her own face. That does not make his death easier to bear. No, Kelthus agreed. But it makes it meaningful. The galaxy will remember what happened here. They will remember that warnings matter. They will remember that assumptions can be fatal. They will remember that even young species can possess power beyond imagination. They stood together in silence, two people from different worlds united by shared grief and reluctant understanding. Earth's defensive grid never fired again. Thousands of ships entered the Terran perimeter over the following years, all of them with proper authorization, all of them peaceful. The grid remained active, watching, waiting, a silent guardian that had proven its capability once and needed never prove it again. Humanity took its place among the galactic community, respected not for the size of their empire or the age of their civilization, but for their willingness to defend themselves with absolute certainty and their wisdom in limiting that power to purely defensive purposes. The 90,000 names on the memorial wall became the galaxy's reminder that even the mightiest civilizations must listen when others speak of danger, that pride can cost more than any war, and that sometimes the youngest voices speak the most important truths. Ambassador Sarah Chen served Earth for 30 more years. She never forgot the faces of those who died because no one would listen to her warnings. She never forgot Commander Raltha's final expression as he realized too late that humans had been telling the truth. And she never forgot the lesson that humanity had paid for with 4 billion lives during the collapse. That the greatest threats often come from our own assumptions about what is possible and what others are capable of achieving. The galaxy changed that day when 60 ships disappeared. It became more careful, more thoughtful, more willing to listen. And Earth, the species that had nearly destroyed itself and then built defenses to ensure it could never be destroyed by others, became known not as conquerors or warriors, but as survivors who had learned wisdom through suffering and were willing to share that wisdom with anyone who would listen. The Terran defensive grid continued its silent watch over Earth, a monument to humanity's determination to survive, a warning to those who would threaten them, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one you never want to use but must always be prepared to deploy.